tuning into Roll Call. The movie you selected is Concussion, starring Will Smith.
All right, hey everyone, welcome to Roll Call, the show where two childless millennials gush over movies and follow an actor's journey from their early years throughout their blockbuster hits.
Because let's face it, this is a very serious topic that is affecting more than just one sport actually beyond the NFL, but very interesting movie. So if this was at Blockbuster, this would be a must-see.
Absolutely, a must-see.
All right, everybody, I'm Bria, and I don't think I've ever related to a quote more. I never leave it alone, and that's why people hate me.
Oh man, I'm sorry, I have to laugh. I don't think people hate you. I'm not agreeing with you on that, but I know you don't like to leave things alone.
The truth is all that I'm after, much like Dr. Amalu. So
there you go. There you go. And I'm Simone, and originally my opening line was different, but it's such a niche line that I'm scrapping it, and that I'm still forever in awe with everything that athletes put themselves through. This was my first time watching this movie. Today I've heard a lot about, the research and study behind it, and I just really appreciate just little attention to details in today's movie. It felt very forensic files. Felt very smart watching it. So I'm getting ready to talk about it.
Yes, this is definitely a movie that I feel like you would leave a theater learning something from. So
yes.
What are we talking about? We are talking about, of course, Will Smith in 2015's biographical drama Concussion, which is based on a true story. So let's take a trip back to December 2015.
All right.
I decided to go with a very sports heavy.
Love it. It fits the theme.
Hour. So we're going to talk football. So if you're not a football fan, then sorry. There's some other stuff at the end here, but just painting a picture of what the NFL was like in 2015. The 50th season of the NFL, so a hallmark year, so to speak. Mm-hmm. The defending Super Bowl champions were none other than the New England Patriots. They played their first game of the season against no other than the Steelers, which is a huge part of this movie. So I thought that was an interesting fact to put in. 3 teams this season announced their intention to relocate. That includes the previous Oakland Raiders, the St. Louis Rams, and the San Diego Chargers. All of these teams are now situated in their brand new homes and stadiums. So RIP to the Coliseum, if you know, you know. The NFL hired the first full-time female official in NFL history, Sarah Thomas, in 2015. So you have some female women's history there. Cam Newton was the MVP of the season and offensive player of the year. The defensive player of the year was J.J. Watt. The Super Bowl was held in Santa Clara, California at Levi Stadium. I got to go to the Super Bowl Village stuff with Jessica, actually, and take some pictures and drink some beers and stuff. So that was fun.
Follow-up question. Yes. Was this was the last game that was probably held at the Santa Clara? Oh, wait, no, Sarah, I'm sorry, I was thinking about Candlestick. Candlestick was done at this point.
No, yeah, Candlestick was demolished.
Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. Haha, okay.
But the Super Bowl Village, yeah, so it tends to be like, if there's a newer arena, they tend to want to put their bid in for things like this, or like for basketball, the All-Star game and stuff like that. So they won the bid for the Super Bowl this year because it bounces around. But the Super Bowl Village stuff was in San Francisco. And for those who are not acquainted with geography of the Bay Area, they are not close together at all. The San Francisco 49ers are not very much in San Francisco. But anyways, the Super Bowl was the Broncos versus the Panthers. So Cam Newton, the MVP, was playing in his first, I think, Super Bowl. But let's not forget, for those people who aren't sports fans, this halftime show was none other than Beyonce revealing Formation and Bruno Mars with Uptown Funk. Yes. And oh my God, my bad. Coldplay was the actual headliner.
Oh, right. Excuse yeah. But were they really, though?
Who remembers that? Nobody. So don't let Beyonce guest on your Super Bowl show. Just saying. The Super Bowl MVP was Von Miller of the Denver Broncos. In other kind of pop culture news, sans sports, I wanted to talk about the meme of John Travolta looking confused. I'm just talking about the meme of him from Pulp Fiction. Yeah, just like... where, he's confused. And then musically, last episode, I wanted to wait and talk about the years that Kendrick Lamar and Drake had. Just surface, kind of. Drake released Hotline Bling this year, which I felt like by Christmas was just everywhere. Like, everybody and their mom knew that song, even if you weren't a Drake fan. I definitely remember people with Hotline Bling Christmas sweaters. And then once the video came out, that became a meme. The mixtape cover for If You're Reading This, It's Too Late was its own meme as well, with that kind of like slanted, crooked writing. And he revived the slang term woes in Know Yourself. So Kendrick Lamar had an amazing year because he released songs like All Right, his album To Pimp a Butterfly, which eventually would win a Pulitzer, becoming the first hip-hop artist to do so. I saw him this year. I think I saw Drake that year too. I saw lots of people that year, I think. But yeah, these are big albums and moments in hip-hop. Another moment in hip-hop, but movie-related, is the movie Straight Outta Compton is released and kind of enters NWA into the zeitgeist. People are listening to NWA and Eazy-E and Ice Cube probably more than they did before. I know Straight Out of Somewhere shirts were everywhere. I had a work one that said Straight Outta Claims. Do I wear it anymore? Absolutely not. But it was everywhere at the time. And then moving into movie news, this year, Will and Jada boycott the Oscars along with Spike Lee, while 50 Cent and Tyrese ask none other than host Chris Rock to step down and join them in their boycott. So they're like always 2 degrees of separation away from each other.
Yeah, truly.
The movies of Christmas 2015 that came out with Concussion, not just December, are Point Break, Daddy's Home, The Revenant, and The Hateful Eight. And the Oscars boycott, by the way, is like Oscars so white, like diversity boycott.
Yeah. I can't believe I forgot The Revenant.
Mission Impossible 5 also.
Damn, dude, I missed a butt ton of movies.
Alvin and the Chipmunks, but yeah. So, what did the movie Concussion cost? What did it make? And what did House of L'Orange, Roger Ebert think?
Yes. All right. Well, compared to other movies, Concussion had a smaller budget. We can see why it's not going to be one of those bigger style budget films as we just released with After Earth, but the estimated budget for Concussion was $35 million. Opening weekend, which closed on December 27th, was $10.5 million. I'm kind of rounding a little bit. Total gross between US and Canada was $34.5 million, and total gross worldwide was $48.6 million. So earning its money back, but not one of those bigger blockbusters. I think probably a lot of, as we just said, that this month of December is holiday movie time. Lots of families are on vacation for holiday break, and so a lot of people tend to go to the movies a lot in this month. In addition to holiday movies, I think people might tend to see a movie like Revenant or Force Awakens or Mission Impossible, some of these bigger like action, family friendly. I know my parents saw Concussion the year that it came out, but it was not one of those like Yamshan family like Christmas movies that we watched together.
That makes sense. Definitely a kind of mom and pop movie.
Absolutely. And I remember its high praise when it came out. And so just because it doesn't rank in the hundreds of millions of dollars doesn't mean that it did not deserve its praise. So would you have any guesses on the ranking of the House of Little Raj?
I mean, my ranking is high, so I'd be conservative at 3.5.
All right, you are close. The writer for this Concussion review is by Glenn Kenny, and he and House of Little Raj gives Concussion 3 stars. I'm going to kind of steal what you did last time, which was when we were talking about focus, when you did and you covered the Little Raj review, you also did the summary of the film. So if it's okay with you, I'm gonna steal that. And I think that's probably a good time to probably just like incorporate that into our show that way.
You heard it here first. It's like Lil Raj, his declaration, I don't know, his knighting as Lil Raj has been documented.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't know.
So, as Bria said earlier, Concussion is kind of a biographical film covering the life of not the entire lifespan, but an important work from Dr. Bennett Omalu, who is a Nigerian doctor practicing in the United States who discovered CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Yeah. And I'm going to just say that once and just continue on to call it CTE. Omalu is a real-life doctor while working as a forensic pathologist in Pittsburgh, discovered a new and terrifying brain disorder called CTE. He discovered it performing an autopsy on a retired Pittsburgh Steeler named Mike Webster, who in the movie was portrayed by David Morse. Webster left the game as a hero and began losing his mind well before his death at 50. Scenes shortly before his death show him living in his pickup truck, huffing turpentine, and a fellow player himself begins to suffer a familiar fate in the movie, tries to help him out. Neither man understands what's happening to them. Omalu figures it out. The persistent head injuries sustained in football play shake up the brain. As characters explain, unlike other mammals, humans don't have built-in shock absorbers for their gray matter and release a protein that builds up and causes hallucinations, memory loss, and much more trauma. This film was written and directed by Peter Landesman and is based in part by a 2009 magazine article about Omalu. And he was inspired by this story and wanted to tell it in real life. The response his findings elicit from the NFL quickly tried to prove him as a mistake. As we know, the NFL is a billion-dollar industry. Football is one of the most American things of all time. So when someone tries to criticize the sport or bring something negative to light, of course, they're going to be met with opposition. So as Omalu's boss and mentor, played by Albert Brooks, a nice mix of world weariness and faith puts in, Omalu is going up against an organization that owns literally a day of a week. Will Smith's performance as Omalu is lovely. A small-scaled, precise, imbued with righteousness, but not tritely pious. There's a lot of big words in this one. One thing I've noticed when Smith's essays such a performance in a movie that's not entirely bad, and this movie is rather good, my fellow critics seem a little surprised. I don't understand why. Even since before his first serious film and adaptation, acclaimed stage play 6 Degrees of Separation, he was clearly a gifted and versatile performer. And although his career in recent years has admittedly encompassed a lot of work in which he more or less merely has to just be Will Smith, there hasn't necessarily led to a discernment of his chops. He's also surrounded by expert players, including Alec Baldwin and Albert Brooks, as a one-time team doctor who is both disturbed and stimulated by their findings. This movie is engaging and fascinating for much of its 2 hours. The editing is done by William Goldberg, who won the Oscar for Argo, 6 Degrees of Ben Affleck, and put together Zero Dark 30 as well. This movie is brisk and inventive, managing to imbue excitement into montages in which Omalu is doing nothing more pulse pounding than looking at a bunch of slides. But once Omalu finds fans, players, and the football industry itself giving him the very aggressive side eye, the narrative begins to diffuse. I found that this possibly involuntary discretion worked into the movie's advantage. The non-ratcheting up of drama somehow made the story more true, more honest. The real story, in a sense, is how Omalu's belief in the goodness of some institutions came under assault, and how he refused to become a cynic even after all of that. When he's an American hero near the end of the movie, the truth of that phrase, as well as all contradictions that trail in its wake, are vividly felt.
I like this review.
Yeah. I don't know if we very well may have read a Glenn Kenny review in last season. The person that's really sticking out to my mind the most is Mel Minnow, who's that like boomer that was like, you need to go to school. She reviewed, was the J-Lo movie where she faked going to college? Second Act.
Yeah.
And she got that CEO job, and she's like, I hate when movies do this because everyone needs to go to school.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm looking through his reviews, I don't think we've read one of his for J-Lo, but he has some interesting movie reviews, like some good movies, I would say. So maybe I wonder too how they like pick who's going to write about what. Like, I was just going to ask. Yeah, it seems like his movies seem like dramas and like kind of like these heavier type of like cinematic movies, you know?
Yeah. So I wonder if the writing team of House of Little Raj gets like, you're in charge of drama, you're in charge of rom-coms, you're in charge of like horrors or thrillers or mystery, or if they just get to choose themselves based on seniority. I think that's a good question.
Like he did a review for Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. Interesting. Anyways, what are your thoughts on Concussion? How many pumps of butter would you give this?
I give 4 pumps of butter for this performance and for this movie in its entirety. Again, as we move through this podcast journey together, I often have to remind myself you are reviewing the acting, not necessarily the movie and the plot. But in this case, this was a scenario in which I thought everything worked really, really well together. I think Will does very well in a biopic role. We know that Will Smith can Will Smith, and he is great at himself and being the funny man and the hype man in the role. But between Ali and Pursuit of Happiness and now Concussion, I feel as though he takes these roles of other people incredibly seriously into heart and brings this really great depth to their stories. And what really did it for me was closing my eyes and listening to him speak. I couldn't pick out Will Smith. I wasn't able to hear his actual tones and inflections. And to me, that just really stood out as a true testament to his acting, his ability to pick up a Nigerian accent and play someone with such a gentle touch, but yet a determination. I thought was fantastic. This was one of my favorite Will Smith roles so far.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to talk about, I think, this time in terms of his acting, so I'll save that. But this is a 4 pumps for me because I think, like I said at the beginning, like this is a movie that you watch and hopefully you learn something from. I think now, like, we know a lot more about CTE, like, casually than we did when this movie came out. But I can imagine people watching this movie and never hearing of CTE, being like, oh my God, that's revolutionary, crazy, like, and having some feelings towards the NFL. And I think Will did really well in this role, and I would say he's a fan of the deep dive. I think that's probably why him and biographical roles seem to work really well. Like, he's all about putting in the work and a big researcher on stuff. And I feel like when you have a real person to portray, like, the more important that research is versus a fictional person that you're just kind of making up stuff about. But yeah, we'll talk about his role later. But two, an important part too, while we do focus on one person, sometimes like the other people in the movies don't contribute. And I think this cast was amazing. The cinematography was amazing. Like, the story of other people, football players and stuff surrounding Dr. Amalu was also on point. So by no means does Will just carry this movie. So
very well put. I agree.
Did you watch the trailer?
I sure did. So that's what's exciting about watching a movie for the first time for this show, is getting to watch the trailer also with new eyes. Now, I'm probably sure I saw the trailer in theaters because I saw other movies that came out during this time. So I'm sure the Concussion trailer was in there. You and I saw Force Awakens together in the theater, and I know that they strung us along and probably showed some movies before they did it at the, wasn't quite the midnight premiere. It was like the 8 o'clock premiere.
It was I want to see this when it comes out, but not beyond my bedtime.
Correct. Correct. So there's two main trailers for this. Both kind of depict this similar narrative of one man going against almost what feels like the impossible. It's like standing up to big pharma, standing up to tobacco, standing up to the NFL, and especially being a foreigner and someone who wasn't born and raised in that American culture that already kind of has that adversity going against them of not being able to, well, you're, criticizing this because you don't get it. Like, you're not American. So it's easy for you to criticize what's happening in football. And I thought that they really captured that part of the story really well in the trailer.
Yeah, this trailer, I feel like it combines like intense drama with like the sports of it all too, like showing flashes of the game, and then a lot of like Will's like dialogue about like CTE and his researching. So it's like very intense. So I feel like you definitely know what you're getting into watching it. Surprisingly, I thought this movie was totally different than it was. I thought he played a football player who had CTE. So imagine my delight when he's like Nigerian and a doctor. but if I remembered and saw this trailer, like, I wouldn't have been surprised by this movie. What else? The cast. Let's talk about the cast.
Oh yeah, like you so eloquently said, Will Smith has carried movies and could carry a movie by himself, but had a really lovely supporting cast to bring out, I think, the complexities of his character. So one of the people that was alongside Will Smith was another doctor named Dr. Julian Bales, played by Alec Baldwin. What did you think about his performance?
Despite what I think about Alec Baldwin, it was actually really good. I feel like he played, like, he looks like a doctor, and I don't know, like, I was kind of surprised maybe. I shouldn't be surprised because, I mean, my reference for Alec Baldwin is like a little bit of 30 Rock, but definitely more than likely like Beetlejuice. So he's got chops. It's just, unfortunately, he teeters the line of like, I know you more for like your shenanigans than your acting. So I think he too was able to, like, I was able to buy into his Dr. Julian Bales and not really be like, oh yeah, that's Alec Baldwin. So
Yeah. See, for me, it's hard to pull Alec Baldwin out of it. He did attempt somewhat of a southern or like a East Coast kind of accent there, which was fine. It didn't take it out of it for me completely, and I kind of appreciated the fact that he did it. And I liked too that his character started off, I don't know if it was like a physician for the Steelers. So he was like personally treating a lot of these people, or players, excuse me. And this moment when Mike Webster comes in and is like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. And neither does he. And you can see this like shift in that doctor's character of slowly starting to understand this like misdiagnosis and mistreatment of a lot of these players. And it just really goes to show you this evolution of medicine that happens over time. I mean, it really made me think of like early 1800s, 1700s medicine of like, you know, woman's on her period, so she might has this influx of estrogen and hormones, and so therefore we feel a little flighty or sensitive. But back in those days it was like, she has full-blown hysteria, someone give her heroin to like calm her down. And so when a football player is complaining of headaches and dizziness and fatigue and depression, you know, just the automatic response to just pump them full of whatever they need to get them back into tip-top shape.
Yeah. I will say that I feel like I kind of wish there was a little bit more of, like, I think his performance was really subtle in some ways. Like, I kind of wish there was a little bit more of, like, him feeling guilty of some sort, or like him kind of like realizing his role in this. I think by his actions you definitely get that, like him supporting Dr. Amalu's research and trying to get him heard by the NFL and stuff, and talking to like some of the, like one of the players' wife, and getting her on board with the study and studying her husband's brain. But yeah, but I feel like it might be accurate, because I feel like those kind of men, like in that kind of power, just like they kind of know they're doing not so great stuff, so they've probably already toiled with that like guilt. But the woman in me was like, you need to pay for your
yeah.
Better doctor, way more supportive, Dr. Cyril Wecht, played by Albert Brooks. He is Dr. Bennett's boss at the city coroner's office, and he kind of helps champion his research despite some cynics within the office, like Eddie Marson, played by Dr. Stephen Dikowski, played by Eddie Marson. Is that him?
And Daniel Sullivan,
no, that's
played by Mike O'Malley.
Mike O'Malley is the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Eddie Marson. Which doctor is he?
He was the doctor that he was like, you have 2 minutes. And he started to talk to him about the birds. And he's like, nope, fast forward to what you really want to tell me. And then...
Oh my God, he was in Hancock.
He was?
Yeah, he was the evil guy who broke out the jail.
Oh my God! 6 degrees! Didn't even notice.
I'm like, I'm looking through his IMDb pictures.
I mean, I know he looked familiar, and I was like, I don't know, I've seen him before, but I didn't click on his IMDb bubble, and if I had.
But sometimes there are actors where you're like, yes, like I know who you are, but like, you know, you don't know who they are, like you've seen them around. But anyways, Albert Brooks.
Yeah, his character, in just a very subtle way, a little bit reminded me of Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black. Like, just a little bit of a straight shooter partner in the coroner's office, and being like, you need a lady friend. What was his line? He was like, I can verify that being with a woman on occasion can be a pain in the ass, but they are very beautiful and very fun, right? Like, you can tell that he was very like supportive of Dr. Amalu and his research, and wanted to, like, he knew that he was very bright, brilliant, and capable of of his position. So I just like that he was just kind of like, block the haters, keep doing what you're doing.
It's weird because it's like his delivery wasn't convincing or like overwhelmingly like supportive initially. I feel like there were times where he was like catfishing him in some ways of like, you know, like this is gonna cause all this or something, and you're like, oh god, like he's like gonna pull the plug or something, and he's like, keep doing what you're doing, and you're like, oh okay, like great. I did not know he's the voice of Marlin from Nemo, in case you need a reference point. But I liked his portrayal. I think his bald cap kind of bothered me. I was like, is he really bald or not? But a lot of these characters' bald or hair situations were interesting. Very early, I think, coming around to like some better practical effects, but now a little bit noticeable. But yeah, I liked him. And he was my quote from earlier about, you know, people hating him because he won't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. I'm excited to talk about the next person because I feel like I should be a casting director because I said that she should have been in Focus if I could replace the ever great Margot Robbie with a woman of color. I feel like she was on my list of people, but Gugu Mbatha-Raw plays Prima Mutiso. Who is also she's a Kenyan immigrant. Dr. Amalu is Nigerian, but she is also an immigrant, and she needs shelter, conveniently so, after Dr. Cyril tells him, you know, you might need a lady friend. Here she is, by the grace of God, from church. And so she stays with Dr. Amalu, and she's sort of chipping at his very clinical exterior of his doctorness. He has his dining room table set up with like his microscope and his research, and he's studying for another degree. He has like 8 degrees. So, you know, she slowly is like peeling back his layers. But I wasn't sure when I said her for Focus about like her and Will together, and I was like, oh, great, now I can see. And I thought they were pretty good together, and I think part of that is that Will wasn't Will in this movie. Yeah. Now, Focus might be different, but I think her and Amalu, Prima and Amalu, they played them very well and convincingly. I also feel like she's like, I think Gugu is British, but she reminds me so much of Kerry Washington. Like she's just like the British Kerry Washington and younger, so and a little lighter. But I really liked her in this movie.
Yeah, I thought their relationship had a very sweet innocence to it. You know, Amalu is very involved in his church community, and so the pastor finds him and says, you know, we have a new intake. She needs a place to stay. Would you mind, you know, housing her? And it's very clear that he's like, oh shit, I've never had like another person, nonetheless a woman, like stay at my house before. And so I like there's this part where he brings her home for the first time. He opens up his fridge and there's like fruit compote and Coca-Cola, and then on the countertop are like a little bowl of peaches that he was eating, and he just goes, those are my peaches, they should not be there. And she just kind of plays a very lovely supporter to his work and champions for him. I feel like she really brings out a strong part of his character, and I adored their chemistry a lot and really felt their hardships too, because their characters go through some really difficult lows in this movie.
Yeah, I like when she is talking to him because he's unsure of like pushing forward and pushing the issue with the NFL. And so she says, and this is a quote, if you don't speak for the dead, who will? You are of the Igbo tribe, Bennett. When you have the truth, the thing you are told you cannot do is the thing you must do. Embrace that, and nothing created by man can bring you down. And so, you know, behind every great man is a even greater woman. So,
agreed.
Shout out to Prima. But Moving on, we have an amazing performance by David Morse of Mike Webster, the football player.
Holy shit, dude. I felt anxiety watching that. I mean, the performance was phenomenal. You really see this, like, I thought Mike Morse did such an incredible, scary job of this slow slip into madness. And there's a great short bit in addition to the interviews that I watched for this. It's called ESPN. Nope, that's not it. It was called Frontline PB. It was a Frontline PBS special about Iron Mike Webster, and the documentary was called Patient Zero, and takes place kind of probably around the same time this movie was released, as, you know, the factual pieces of scientific information were coming out. And it really was true that as Mike Webster was experiencing these symptoms of CTE, was pulling his own teeth out and gluing them back in with super glue, tasing himself to stay awake and to come back into reality. And
the tasing was so that he would pass out because he couldn't sleep.
That, and thank you. And this, it really kind of made me think, well, after his death, everyone was so sad that their, you know, beloved sports player was gone, but yet supposedly many people knew that he was falling into homelessness and removing himself from his family, and his doctors knew that he was coming in with these complaints of all that stuff. So you really see this panic in the eyes of David Morrison. It was like hard to watch, honestly. It was scary and sad, man.
Yeah. I want to note too that the movie starts off with him and like him getting like into the NFL Hall of Fame, I think, because it's like the yellow jacket ceremony and stuff. And so obviously there's a little context to like his relevancy as a player. And then you start to see like him in his truck and another player that he played with trying to intervene. I think it's a little bit, CTE is a little bit more complex than addiction maybe, but like it kind of mirrors that to me, where like you can see like this person that you know slipping away or slipping into this thing, and as much as you want to help them, like you can't necessarily fix his brain as it is. Like as much as that player was like, what are you doing, like you sold your Super Bowl rings, all those things, he has CTE, and until like they continue research and figure out like ways to help people with it and stuff, like unfortunately I think, you know, stuff like that will just continue. So I'm surprised he didn't get nominated or anything for this performance.
Me too. I mean, it was smaller. If anyone was going to be, I don't know if it was like a big enough role to be considered for like a supporting role, but at least some kind of an acknowledgement for this performance.
Yeah, well, I feel like people in smaller roles have gotten nominated before. But anyways, there's a lot of people in this cast.
Yeah.
But Hill Harper plays an NFL employee who is basically learning about the CTE research coming out and basically trying to shut that shit down, and is like not a go-between. He reminds me of like a fixer for the NFL, kind of like an Olivia Pope type of like
damage control.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. And then we have, who did he play? We have Richard T. Jones, who played Andre Waters, another football player who succumbs to the effects of CTE as well. Where's that one guy with the beard? I don't see him.
Oh, his IMDb picture is clean shaven. It's Stephen Moyer, Ron Hamilton.
That's him? Oh,
yeah.
Wait, that's a doctor, though. It says a doctor.
Oh, it wasn't. Oh, the other Pittsburgh Steeler player?
Yeah.
Oh, he is not listed on the top 10 because his wife is. It was Streletsky or it's a very Polish last name. I'm so sorry. Oh, no, it is. He's there. Matthew Willig playing Justin.
Oh, okay. He's down here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then shout out to Luke Wilson for playing Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner. I haven't seen Luke in a serious movie not be like kind of Luke Wilson, so this was kind of interesting to see him play a little bit more serious and very like cocky and annoying. So
yeah, totally.
And Goodell, this is not a lawsuit. I don't know you, sir.
And just for those 90s Nickelodeon babies out there, Mike O'Malley played Dan Sullivan, and of fame of Global Guts. Do, you have it. Guts.
I didn't realize that was
Well, so he lost his hair, I think, after Guts, and so when he started going bald, I think for me as like a viewer, and I don't mean for this to sound insulting, I know baldness is something that people cannot help, and it is not something that I think people should make fun of, but for me it was like I couldn't recognize him. And I think he had a role in Glee for a while. He played someone's dad on the show.
I mean, he was also on Get the Picture, which I used to watch on the Gas Network, Games and Sports, and he was also on Figure It Out as a panelist occasionally.
Hell yeah, he was.
But yeah, did not recognize him. Did not like his character. He was
he was an asshole.
Yes, he was a fellow coroner who was a snitch. He did not like Dr. Bennett Omalu, and I feel like I want to say it was racist, but I don't know that for sure. Maybe prejudice, because everybody's prejudiced, so you get away with that for sure. But he didn't like him talking to the dead, which is like, that, mind your business. Why are you all up in my autopsy? Like, and then when Mike Weber passed, and unfortunately, probably because this asshole didn't ever want to work weekends, and Dr. Bennett, you know, that immigrant mentality of just like hard work, was like, I'll take the weekends. And so he's outside all upset, like, of course you get to do this autopsy, which, first of all, this is not personal, okay? Like, you should not be like trying to weasel into famous people's autopsies. But Bennett's just like, I work weekends, like, what is the problem? And he obviously knows nothing of football, so he's like, you don't even understand like what's happening and all this stuff. And so he did a good job of that, now knowing that this is homeboy from Guts and, you know, Nickelodeon. So good to Mike O'Malley. I love to see him in more stuff. Moving on, shall we talk about Mr. Smith and the movie?
Yes, let's do it. I don't know. I honestly, this is like such high praise for me. I feel like there's really not a lot of criticisms that I have for his acting in this role. I think that he played each emotion very well and carefully, in that he had a very calm approach, and probably a lot of that coming from what you said, that immigrant mentality of, unfortunately, sometimes just having to do what you're told and having to play along with someone else, but also having this self-righteousness. And I don't mean that to sound like he's cocky, but to have these like morals and values of like, no, this is what I believe in, and this is, you know, what I kind of stand for. The part that I really loved, where I really started to feel his character, was when him and Prima go to the club. She's like dressed up, and he's like, why are you dressed up? Scene. I love a club scene. And she's just like, I'm going out with you, we're celebrating. And they go to this little dance club, and at first he's just kind of like hanging off to the side and observing and watching. And it's funny to see someone like Will Smith, who is charismatic and suave, and literally every other club scene that we've seen him, he's having a good time and he's dancing and he's hamming it up. And then that's where I felt like, wow, this is really good acting, because he's believable as this person who's like, I'm a little out of my element here, and, this is new for me, and I'm also with a very beautiful woman, and asks very politely, like, may I kiss you? And then that, leads into their further relationship. But I feel like this is going to be a really straight-lined episode, because that's really all that I can say, and that it was awesome. I loved his acting in this movie.
I think obviously, I agree, his acting was great. I will say, though, that I did watch an interview where he talks about how at that time in 2015, Twitter was lighting him up about his accent, and Nigerians and Africans alike were pointing out how un-Nigerian it was. And a Nigerian man made the joke that his accent it sounds like if a Nigerian had a concussion. So I just want to acknowledge that while maybe his accent is not passable to people of African descent who knows, what that sounds like, to these American ears, I found it to be believable. And given the previous roles where he's had accents, that we were very much like, it was not that, why? After Earth wasn't great. Legend of Bagger Vance wasn't great. I think Ali was okay, but you could still, tell he was, trying to figure some stuff out acting-wise with that. But, I feel like he really had strong hold on this. He could do it effortlessly, without trying. And I think that's important when an actor is doing an accent, especially if you know them without one. There's plenty of British actors who I'm like, they're not American.
Yeah.
That's a totally different thing. But, when you're able to, if you don't know how they already speak, then that's, oh my God, I didn't even know. But when you know how someone kind of is or speaks normally in life, or at least in press, and, however you're able to witness them as a fan, then, pulling that wool over our eyes is a little harder. And I feel like he did a pretty good job here. I also think, he just embodied this character well, his mannerisms, his body language, his facial expressions, very calm, kind of very steely. His autopsy music choice. I hope when I die, my autopsy person is listening to some badass R&B. He was listening to Teddy Pendergrass, in case you didn't know. But yeah, I just feel like he got it all, down. And I think that that is an excellent performance to me. It's there's nothing that you're like, oh, he could have did this, or I didn't really feel like there's nothing here to pick apart besides maybe his accent for people who know better. But
see, I am someone who does not know better, and that's why I made that statement in the beginning of that I could close my eyes and listen to that person speak. Now, obviously, I know it's Will Smith, but if I had listened to a clip of him speaking pre-watching this movie today, I don't know if I would have been able to say, oh, that's Will Smith in the movie Concussion.
That'd be funny to hear clips of an actor in a role and try to pinpoint the movie and character.
Yeah. I mean, I think
dialogue.
about, yeah, well, so when I do weekly trivia, we sometimes they'll add in a sound clip of a song or someone speaking or a speech or whatever, and we have to guess who the person is. I was thinking when I was watching this today, I was like, if they showed this and we hadn't watched this movie yet, would I have been able to know it's Will Smith? Don't know. So from an outsider's perspective, take that with a grain of salt.
And it's funny that the club scene is your favorite, or not favorite. I don't.
Yeah, it's not my favorite,
but
I liked the autopsy scenes the best. Because it was gross and I like that stuff. I mean, I really enjoyed the attention of detail and like the forensic files feel to this movie. It gave me that little bit of like horror element to it without having it be an actual horror movie. But it just, that scene in particular stood out to me as a testament to his acting. In addition to at the end when Prima loses her first baby, and you really see this toll that this job has taken on their relationship and how they decide to move out to Lodi, California. Shout out, that is very northern Bay Area, Northern California. But yeah, like I felt that pain and moving out of that home that they were going to buy together, ripping apart the walls and all of that. Like there's range.
I was going to say that the scene that I really enjoyed acting wise was the scene where he is, I feel like convincing is too light, but he is in conversation with Alec Baldwin's character, Dr. Julian Bales, and also the doctor for the NFL research, I think, is that Dr. Stephen Dukowski or Dr. Joseph Maroon. Anyways, one of these NFL payroll doctors, and they're having drinks essentially, and the scene where like you have 2 minutes, like the way he talks to him in that scene and the conviction and the like tell the truth line and your men and those like poignant like points and statements just like really, to me, like I'm pretty sure for awards you submit like a clip or something for consideration, and this definitely had to be in there because high praise. Like, and he's like he's so passionate that he's not on the brink of tears, but like his eyes look watery, like of just like that kind of
desperation almost.
Yeah, and like underlying anger probably of like, you guys don't get it and you don't care. And also just the fact that this is a doctor talking to another doctor, these people who have taken oaths to do like the best in the name of medicine no matter what, and it's just not clicking to this dude because of the entity that the NFL is and the power and the structure. And I wrote that America is so ass backwards, like, and two, he is an immigrant who's so kind of in love with America and the American dream. He talks about, and Will talks about this in his interviews, this idea that like heaven is here and America's right below it for a lot of people.
And God sends his like favorite people there.
And that's such a fucked up way to like view, to view like your existence if you're non-American and stuff. But like I can sort of understand it not as an American, but like as I wouldn't go as far to say that God makes men his favorite people. That is not but like even, okay, like celebrities, like they're definitely celebrities I look at, like Margot Robbie, and you're just like, really? Like, I'm made from the same like, ethos as her, allegedly, sure. But that mentality of like, even when he talks to Prima, he's like, you're in America now. Like, you have to find something and just be really good at it or fake it until you are.
Yes.
And I feel like as much as like this country right now has had a lot of ugliness bubble back up in terms of immigration and people of color and racism, that the American dream is really at its core an immigrant dream, because
Absolutely.
I feel like a lot of us who are just American, who have been here for generations, have lost that sense of like, this is a place where I can try and do this. Like, we're so jaded and just over it and stuff. And in one of Will's interviews in the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable, he talks about, you know, like, he kind of sees America the same way. He's like, this is the only place that someone who looks like me can be this global superstar and, like, you know, this actor and this entertainer and stuff. And that's true. I just think that the American dream has shifted for normal people, and or it doesn't exist for normal people, or it doesn't show itself for us, you know, middle class, lower middle class, poor people. Like, it is a great place for people who are, you know, these tycoons, these billionaires, these movie stars, these sports players, like, in terms of, like, yeah, I can be a football player and make millions of dollars. What other country can I do that in? I mean, whereas it's like, I can be in healthcare and barely feel like I'm, like, able to exist. There's plenty of other countries I can barely feel like I'm able to exist. So all that to say that I think if it, like, his immigrant spirit definitely helps in his research. It definitely, like, if it was that Dr. Michael O'Malley plays, like, he'd be like, there's no way football's doing all this bad stuff. Like, I love football. America, football's amazing. He shows up at the coroner's office in his Steelers shirt when he finds out Mike Webster, you know, is dead and stuff. So, I mean, it's in a weird way, like, to have an immigrant figure this out and present all this and be the one who's championing this versus, like, Americans who love football. You love these players, you love this sport, you love this country, but not enough to do the right thing and tell the truth and to speak up on these men and their families' behalf and try to figure this out for the betterment of them. And that was very all over the place, but
no, I disagree. I don't think that was all over the place. I think one thing that we hadn't touched upon until you said it was this other narrative side of the story that this movie was telling. Of this isn't a football movie. This is a story of a person trying to find the best way of telling the truth to a panel of people who have been historically willing to turn a blind eye to this glaring problem because it goes against these quote unquote American, not values, but just something that's so inherently American, like football. And then you have this foreigner, this immigrant, brilliant person, but also a person of color, and saying otherwise, not necessarily attacking the sport, but just saying, hey, have we ever put any effort into the long-term effects of, you know, hitting your head 10,000 times or 50,000 times or something in, like, your lifespan if you start playing football at 5 and then in high school and college and then in your career or whatever. That's really, I think, the heart of the story, and I think Will did a really good job at capturing that.
Yeah. And at the essence of, like, his research, it's not like, oh, I want to try to figure out why these football players are doing this. He really just wants to understand what caused Mike Webster to reach this point of dying this way. Yeah. And it's really just a search for the absolute truth. Yeah. Like,
the medical curiosity of someone who took an oath to try and, you know, do research and make. We can't just always jump to conclusions about, like, oh, they died of pulmonary heart attack or heart failure or whatever they stamped it with.
Yeah, or like Alzheimer's, a big misdiagnosis for people with CTE because of, like, the memory issues and stuff. And so I know you can die from Alzheimer's, but, like, they're so young. Like, he was, like, 50-something. It's like the timetable doesn't even match, and that doesn't concern anybody else. Like, any of these people that have, like Alec Baldwin's character, Dr. Julian, who were on the sidelines with these men, who worked with them, who patched them up during their heyday. And you can tell there's a, like, glimpse of Dr. Julian being like, I know it's more than what I'm able to diagnose it as, but I don't know what it is. So, but I don't think anybody in that position could have like really dived in like he did. Like he had no skin in the game. He was just like, I just wanted to figure out like what was going on with this man to drive him to this point. And even like the scene where he has the jar with like, I want to say it's like a peach, but like some kind of fruit and like water or something, and he's like,
I think it was a piece of brain sitting in like formaldehyde or I don't know. That's what I thought it was. Like this is and then just like hitting it up against the jar. I thought that was an actual piece of Mike Webster's brain, but I could be wrong.
I don't. I'm not sure, but that visual example of like what it's like to have like these hard impacts, and even like him talking about like how hummingbirds, their tongue before they like peck the shit out of some wood is like wrapped around their brain to secure it so it's able to withstand that like, you know, impact and stuff. And they're built that way. Rams are built to butt heads, probably bucks too, like any animal with like antlers and stuff. Human beings are not. And I mean, you would think just on a like basic science level that most like other doctors would probably be like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. But no, like no one's like, you know what, like I don't know about this. And that just goes back to like America and capitalism, because the NFL is a product, and like Dr. Cyril said, they own a day of the week. Like at the core of it, like it doesn't help their product for this to come out, and that's why they were fighting it and hiding stuff. Like at the end, there's the fact that a bunch of players sued the NFL, which happens in 2013, and they settle. But in the settlement, they have a clause or agreement that they won't disclose all the research that they had regarding concussions and stuff. And I feel like it's so shitty in this country to be able to do that. Like,
yes,
why?
But I wonder how much of it goes into someone's, I guess, free will. Because the other statistic at the end of that movie was like 28% of all NFL players will undergo some level of severe head trauma which includes CTE. And Kevin was sitting with me and he was just like, damn, that's almost a third. Like a third of all NFL players could potentially end up with CTE. And by now, we like to think that most of them are aware of this. I wonder if that's in some kind of a clause or a contract when they sign, depending on your position or whatever. Some positions obviously get more jostled than others, but all football players, all sports players run the risk of injuring themselves. But yet, like you said, it's this money machine of like, well, what's the risk worth, like the outcome of being able to play this sport, participate in this sport, make money off of it, get these endorsements or whatever. So
I mean, yes, like, and I think too a big part of it was like too for Will, like in a lot of his interviews, like people are like, were you trepidatious doing this? Like, were you afraid the NFL were gonna come after you? Or like, and he's like, you know, no, but like I actually am a football dad. His son Trey Willard Carroll Smith III played football in high school, and he enjoyed seeing his son play football. He is a football fan himself of the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles. And so all of those things, you know, considered, he's like, the core of this though is that as a parent, if I had known that going into putting my son in football, I might not have. And people don't know this, or they didn't know this. And so yes, we have free will, but like if there are things that could potentially change people's like thought processes and opinions and decision making, and albeit maybe for the better for their health, then they should be aware of that, like, danger. Like, you know, even when you go ziplining, you know, like, you sign a waiver and all that stuff. But if the NFL is just like, no, none of this stuff happening to all these previous players is at all a result of playing in this league, then, that's really shady. That's really shitty. I mean, even speaking of non-football, when I was at Sundance, I saw the movie The Crash Reel, which focuses on a snowboarder, Kevin Pierce, who sustained a really bad head injury preparing for the Olympics, I think. And he was wearing a helmet, but he had really bad memory loss, had to relearn how to walk, all those kinds of things. So while yes, this movie is about football, CTE goes beyond football. It goes to any sport you can potentially hit your head. So while it started because of football, the research and all that stuff, it spans beyond it, and it's helpful to know for people participating in other sports. When I saw what was happening, first Mike Webster in his truck, and then the other guy,
Justin Sturzelchuk, I think.
Yeah, him. They both just so happened to, maybe it's just Pittsburgh, but happen to have trucks.
Yeah.
It made me think of Dave Mirra, the BMX player, who also had a history of concussions and committed suicide. Or I don't know if committed is the right phrasing anymore, but he is no longer with us, and a lot of people believe that that is part of it, his concussion history and probably CTE. Another BMX biker, he's still here, but Matt Hoffman has had a lot of concussions, and he's a bit not quite there anymore, I feel like. Muhammad Ali, his Parkinson's probably might have been
any boxer, mixed martial arts where they're getting swift kicked to the head.
Yeah, so all that to say that football, as much as they want to be shady about withholding their findings and studies and having it feel oh, this doctor is targeting us or something, it goes beyond them, because it is a human disease that could be brought on by many different ways of sustaining concussions multiple times. So all that to say that, who knows? I thought in a perfect world, football would not exist anymore. But free choice exists. So if you want to risk, all of this for some great games and all that comes with sports and maybe millions of dollars, then by all means, you have that option. Oh, Aaron Hernandez, another huge football player.
Yep. That documentary was huge in the mind of Aaron Hernandez. Yep.
WWE wrestlers. There's a few wrestlers who have done the kill their family and then themselves kind of thing, and a lot of that too could possibly be related to sustaining head injuries and stuff. So I mean, yeah, it just goes beyond all that. So I'm kind of glad, because initially, and we can pivot now maybe, initially I was I feel I might have, I enjoyed this movie. This movie was movie, and, but, or filming. It's not a movie, it's a film. But part of me was I feel a very baseline movie that most people would have just, enjoyed would have been, not enjoyed, but, would have been along for the journey, would have been to follow, to have it be I thought it was, a football player who had CTE, did know it, and see that journey. So not to say that I would remake this movie as that, but I think there's room for more movies about CTE and its effects, and also the effects of the families that get left behind.
Yes. I think it would be really interesting to see maybe a biographical film about a sports player that is confirmed to have CTE, or perhaps have CTE or have this, in this wave of like strange true crime documentary obsessions that get released to various platforms like Netflix or Hulu or whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to involve someone like Aaron Hernandez or someone who killed someone or themselves or their family, but like to have this investigative journalism on how CTE has affected various players and families of different sports, I think would be something after watching this film that I would definitely be interested in watching.
Yeah, I love a good documentary, especially a sports documentary. So I doubt that that's not probably eventually gonna happen. But if I could pick someone to have a biographical fictional movie to follow, they showed and mentioned Junior Seau, and I think that he would be probably a great person to show his life in football and his like him succumbing to the effects of CTE and his death. But that depends on his family too. Like, obviously that's probably hard to consider, but like these kinds of stories are important in awareness and understanding these this disease and these kinds of diseases, whether it's CTE or Alzheimer's or what's the other one? Dementia, yes. But yeah, so I wouldn't really change anything about this movie, but I just think maybe there's room for more movies about CTE and concussions. I'm sure there's probably like ESPN documentaries, like 30 for 30s or something about some of, but I think this movie is not that far removed, so I think this role holds up today. Yep. Could easily have been made, recently, but it's very timely for when it came out. Do we have a snack and cocktail?
I do. And originally I was going to go Coca-Cola and peaches because that was the only other thing. But then I was like, well, let's lean a little bit more football into it. So my cocktail is called the Football Fizz. And it is made with Crown Royal, ginger ale, mint, and lime. So it's almost like a mojito, but with Crown.
Interesting.
Which I have all of those ingredients. Might give it a shot. Who knows? Crown's not necessarily my favorite thing in the world, but
yeah, I think you should start making some of these drinks you find and posting them on TikTok.
All right, I'll give it a shot. And then here's where my brain goes to. I once had an interaction with someone immediately after they got a concussion, and it was one of the most bizarre, kind of frightening interactions. It was actually with a student. I was doing after-school tutoring in addition to substitute teaching, and I was working at this tutoring company, and it was of this mindset of familial culture of like, oh, it doesn't matter, like you don't need to, like, doesn't matter if you have straight A's, you still need tutoring kind of thing, of like that extracurricular push. And so this student came in for an advanced reading class, and he was like really out of it. And I was like, are you okay? And he was kind of like drooling from the mouth. He was like, I just came from football practice and I got like hit really, really hard. And I was like, and I took my pen and I tried to do the doctor thing of like, can you follow my pen? And he couldn't follow along. He was like dozing on and off. I'm like, this motherfucker has a concussion. And his parents like dropped him off at tutoring. So I was like, I might damn well call 911. So I called the front office and was like, this kid needs to be picked up immediately and needs to go see a doctor. Sure enough, he had a concussion. And when he came back the next week, he was like talking about his recovery. And so all of that to say, I looked up foods to eat that help your brain after sustaining a major head injury. And this is a little derivative from like where we normally go on this show, but
I think this whole episode.
This article comes from Flint Rehab Tools to Spark Recovery, but so I don't know if the person who published this is a medical professional, but it was medically reviewed by Courtney Maher, who is an OTR, and this was published in 2020. Wondering what to eat when you have a concussion? Your diet is an important aspect of recovery. So we sourced clinical evidence to create a list of the best foods for recovery after a concussion. I'm not going to read the entire article, but it goes into some great science about following a concussion. Magnesium and zinc levels will immediately drop, and magnesium and zinc are important tools that the brain uses to reduce inflammation and improve cognition after injury. So you need to make sure that you eat foods that are high in those levels. And so therefore you want to eat foods that are very antioxidant rich in magnesium and zinc. So some of those foods are blueberries, cranberries, green tea, pecans and other nuts high in fat, olive oils, broccoli, dark chocolate, and fatty fish like mackerel and salmon.
Sounds about right.
Yep. So my snack and cocktail is a football fizz with some blueberries and dark chocolate. There you go.
And I guess I'll go like, this movie's too serious, I feel like, for Super Bowl party fare.
I know. That's what I was originally thinking.
They were drinking like scotch, I feel like, a few times. So I feel like that's a good one. If I were going to a football game, I would definitely probably get like one of those aluminum bottled Bud Lights or something. And then maybe just like nachos.
The famous food from Pittsburgh, too. It's like not a hoagie necessarily, but it is a 15 distinctly Pittsburgh foods. Oh, the Primanti Brothers. That's the sandwich I was thinking of. It's like a very, very famous style sandwich with like white bread, this like coleslaw and fries, and it looks really good. I've seen it all over like diners, drive-ins, and dimes, and all the Food Network shit.
Yeah, it looks good. I'd eat one of those for sure. Pittsburgh salad.
Right. Oh yeah, we're on the same article.
Pierogies again.
Delicious.
Yeah. So maybe I'll take one of those sandwiches.
All right.
Heinz. I didn't ketchup was made in Pittsburgh.
Just guzzle it.
I also had like a very probably American dumb moment of, not super dumb, but I was like, what state is Pittsburgh in? Like, it's Pennsylvania, right? But so is Philadelphia. Like, they can't be in the same state. And I'm like, but Pennsylvania already has like a football team. But I looked it up and they are in Pennsylvania. So they just feel very like distinctly different to me for some reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So we'll go with the Primanti Brothers sandwich. So next podcast trip, Pennsylvania. There
we go. Add it to the list.
And I guess that's it. Like, outro.
Let's wrap it up.
So thank you for listening to this week's episode, and to the people who've stuck with us so far, please come back for another episode of the very smart and intellectual version of Inside the Actors Studio.
But seriously, if you like us enough to stick around, take another deep dive down this IMDb rabbit hole. We are going away from sports and moving into comic book territory next week as we discuss Will Smith in the 2016 live-action DC comic movie Suicide Squad. And we will see Margot Robbie, our dear queen, again.
Yes, and we also get to see Baghdaddy, but... on another note, if you've got nothing better to do, go figure out a theme to watch a bunch of movies you've never seen.
I'm your host, Simone. Subscribe to this blessed mess. Leave us a like if you are into it.
And I'm your host, Bria, and it would be awesome for you to wipe off those buttery popcorn fingers and give us a review. Follow us at Roll Call Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, and listen to us on YouTube if that suits your fancy. And this has been another episode of
Da-na-na-na-na-na, roll call. Na-na-na-na, roll call.
I feel like this movie messed with our brains.
Yeah, it did. It was really smart and scientific. But I liked it. Like, I felt like I learned a lot, and it wasn't silly enough to make fun of it, but it also wasn't. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And cut. Oh, wait. No. Don't leave meeting. Just stop. Okay.